The pads are on. 49ers training camp just got that much more real today. It felt like football, real football for the first time all season. You heard that pop from the sideline. A lot of big hits. They had 4 practices without the pads. This is the reigning number one defense in football. And it's also an exceptionally physical offense. I think that the culture of the 49ers, this whole team really wanted to hit somebody over the course of the first 4 days, but they couldn't. So there was some restrained and pent up energy that needed to get out today, and it got out. So you heard those pads popping. There were some big hits. Some of them might have come questionably late, and they probably led to the fight that we've already talked about. A big, big skirmish that went from one practice field to the other. Maybe 20 to 25 players. It felt like half the team was in it. That's what Matt Barrows wrote in The Athletic. You should probably check out Matt's piece, which does a really good job covering practice today. But that was the result of many, many months of buildup. I mean, we called it, right? We said entering training camp, oh boy, the 49ers defense and offense, they're talking some crap to each other on social media. That wasn't happening in years prior. And we know that last year things got really competitive on the field. Brandon Ayuk even fought Fred Warner. That was the headlining fight of training camp. So we said there's probably going to be more this year. There indeed has been another fight this year, and it happened on the first day of padded practice. So you have pent up energy. You've got a team that's physical, that wants to hit somebody. They finally get a chance to hit. They might cross the line a little bit in that practice just because they had so much of that built up desire to go out and make contact. And because the line might have been crossed, the specific hit before the fight was Demetrius Flanagan-Foles, the linebacker, against Elijah Mitchell. He really gave him some good contact. That when that line is crossed, an altercation might happen. And in the fight that we watched, Tay Martin seemed to be in the middle of it. Jawan Jennings seemed to be in the middle of it. So was Quantrez Knight. And it just so happens that all three of those players made plays actually on the practice field today outside of the fight as well. So, Kyle Shanahan circled the team together and said, guys, we can't have this happening too much. And he'll go overboard and he'll say we can't have it happening at all. But I think every football coach knows that this naturally occurs when you have that pent-up aggression, that pent-up energy, a bunch of competitors out on the field. You're going to see fights in training camp. Kyle Shanahan just doesn't want to see too many of them. And maybe he's just breathing a sigh of relief. All right, this energy got out. That happened. Nobody got hurt. And it happened about 10 minutes into the first padded team periods of 2023 training camp. Now Kyle Shanahan can have the 49ers focusing on football. Perhaps that's the way that he's kind of reconciling this and squaring it away in his mind. But the pads are on. That happened today. And so did Trey Lance's, in my opinion, best ever training camp practice. He was one of the stars today. So was Javon Kinlaw, who made waves. And, we talk about the players on the trenches and how they look physically when they show up to camp. But for all intents and purposes, we can't make real evaluations until now, until they can actually play football, because it's passing league kind of stuff when they're in shorts and no pads. Today, they had one-on-ones, and Javon Kinlaw won nearly every single one of his reps. There was even one time where he lined up as a defensive end in one-on-ones. And Matt Barrows, again, I talk about Matt a lot, but his article's up on the screen, so you should subscribe to it on The Athletic. He illustrated it perfectly. We've talked about Kinlaw being slimmed down. We've talked about him going nearly a year now without a setback to his knee issues. And because he's slimmed down, because he's looking more spry, because he's already a giant, he's tall, obviously, the body type is a little bit more like Eric Armstead's now than a pure defensive tackle. So the 49ers have a glut of talent at defensive tackle, which is the opposite of last year, right? Because they have picked up Javon Hargrave this year. Makes things a little bit more crowded on the inside. They do have a shortage of proven, experienced talent at defensive end, especially with Nick Bosa still away due to the contract holdout. Does that mean that maybe Javon Kinlaw might come in handy for a snap or two on the outside, depending on what Chris Kocurek wants to do, depending on alignment? Sure. And we saw that a hint of that specific deployment today, but I think that it's still too early to make any really detailed predictions for where Kinlaw is going to, play on third and whatever. It's just good for the 49ers that Javon Kinlaw looks so dominant right now. that he looks like he's in really good shape, that he looks healthy, and that he's able to win a lot of one-on-one reps against fellow NFL players. So more on Trey Lance in just a bit. We can go through, some of the quarterback things. I think that I put this on a little bit earlier. The pads are on, and all three quarterbacks practiced well. Apparently, that's not allowed in the world of binary thinking on social media. A lot of people have this a little bit twisted. Maybe they have it very twisted. But as soon as they heard that Trey Lance played well, they immediately got up and said, well, that meant that Brock Purdy sucked. That's great because I like Trey Lance. I mean, this is literally the tone of people who are following this online. Maybe it's an extreme minority. Maybe it's not. But my point is that the 49ers see it as a goal to have all their quarterbacks do well. John Lynch spoke this morning and said that they were scarred by how the season ended last year when they ran out of quarterbacks. So they want more quality quarterbacks so they don't run out of them again. The 49ers' goal is for all the quarterbacks to do well. And I think they saw that goal realized today. In fact, I put this thought out there after. I said, if the 49ers quarterback situation at practice continues on the trajectory that it's shown over the past 2 days, it's going to be a really robust and deep 49ers quarterback room. I can show you a little graphic here. Are you ready? Because this one's going to be good. This illustrates where exactly the 49ers are with the QB room after 5 days in terms of completion percentage. Have a look at this. 49ers quarterbacks, remember, 5 practices. The first 3 days of practice, they completed 48% of their passes. The last 2 days of practice, they've completed 71% of their passes. So Brock Purdy, Trey Lance, and Sam Darnold were all at or above 75% today with pads on. So I mentioned it was Trey Lance's best career practice. He went 9 of 11. Made a lot of good throws, a lot of throws into tight windows. We're going to show the 49ers sizzle reel here in a second to prove the throws that Trey Lance made. But when I say what's with the binary thinking, why can't people just acknowledge that Brock Purdy had a fine day too? He was 12 of 16. I even heard that somebody had tallied him at 13 out of 16. I went back to my notes, 12 out of 16 for Brock Purdy. And I recognized right away that Brock Purdy made a terrible throw on a pick to Trey Greenlaw, and then he threw a pass short the rep before that to Charlie Werner. But Purdy also completed 4 straight passes early on and 8 straight later on. So it wasn't a bad day for Brock Purdy. I mean, the guy had completed 75% of his passes, including the longest touchdown of the day, a 70-yarder to Christian McCaffrey, who'd beaten Fred Warner. So it's totally fine for Trey Lance to have a great day and Brock Purdy to also have a great day. And you know what? Sam Darnold also remained quietly sharp. Purdy made the big mistake with the interception of the day, right? So I think that if you just had to look at it and evaluate just today, who was better today? Obviously, Trey Lance had the better stat line today. Sam Darnold also a better stat line at 7 and 9 than 12 of 16. But all three of these guys were at 75%, and all three of them did a lot of effective stuff on the field. Now, the full context every time, and this should be something that you just keep in your mind, is Brock Purdy works with the first team, so he has to play against the strongest defense. And Trey Lance and Sam Darnold split reps with the second team. Lance and Darnold are going to split first team reps on the days that Purdy doesn't practice, but Purdy should be back out there tomorrow. Will be his second of 2 consecutive days. And then I think that we'll see on Thursday, we'll see Sam Darnold and Trey Lance split those first team reps with Purdy getting another day off. So they can all be good at once. It's okay. And the 49ers are very likely going to carry 3 quarterbacks on their 53-man roster this year. John Lynch said it's not likely they carry 4 on the 53, but 3 on that 53 plus 1 on the practice squad. The question is, can you sneak Brandon Allen in on the practice squad? Is he going to be willing to take less money? You might be able to dangle, not a promise, but dangle the opportunity of, hey, we might need you very soon. Why don't you stay in the building on the practice squad? We'll see how strong the 49ers offer and their culture is, but there's a limit to what you could pay somebody on that practice squad. And it's only in the 200,000 range, maybe closer to 300,000 now, but it's not anywhere near what Brandon Allen was making last year, for example, as the number 2 in Cincinnati. Anyway, that's neither here nor there. That's still a month from now. We're at July 31st and cut down day is, I believe, on August 30th. It's in late August this year. So there's a lot of time for this to organically develop, which is exactly what the 49ers are expecting. And speaking of organic development, why don't we organically watch and organically transition to the 49ers practice and see what that 49ers sizzle reel looks like. The first play they show is Brock Purdy going to Christian McCaffrey. Look at him smoking Fred Warner. Biggest play of the day, Purdy to McCaffrey, 70-yard touchdown. Then we move on to Trey Lance. Crisp throw to the sideline. Trey Lance, another crisp throw to the sideline. But look, Samuel Womack with the pass breakup. Womack has been playing well this training camp. One-on-one drills, Chris Conley's been doing some stuff. Conley caught Lance's most impressive pass of the day. You'll see it a little bit later. There's Purdy escaping pressure, finding Elijah Mitchell out of the backfield. All the running backs doing well in the pass game. Danny Gray got some compliments from John Lynch today. Now we see Deebo Samuel. Samuel, the catch and run, and then just the run. When he's moving as fast as he is now at the lighter weight, he's starting to give you some 2021 vibes. We'll see if that can carry over into the season. All right, there it is. That throw, Conley hadn't even come out of his break, and that ball's already on its way from Trey Lance. Really, really impressive. The intermediate throws from Trey Lance have been on the money. There's the interception. Brock Purdy to Dre Greenlaw. You could see he floated that one up there. He was going for George Kittle. And just, it's a throw you can't make if you're Brock Purdy. Too much of a jump ball. There's going to be something else in that offense, or throw it away. And there is the most precise throw of the day. Trey Lance to Ray McLeod. Now, in a game situation, would this have been a catch? I just watched this again. I thought it might have hit the ground there. Either way, you can't take much away from Trey Lance's throw. That's exactly where it needs to be. And you know what? That came in a pressure spot. The 49ers started running move the ball, which means that the teams are actually trying to advance the chains. They're facing 1st and 10, 2nd and 4, 3rd and 3, 4th down, you name it, instead of just running a bunch of scripted plays at practice. So move the ball is as competitive as it gets in practice, and Trey Lance saved some of his best football for the move the ball period. That was the completion to Ray McLeod. It was his penultimate completion, and then he hit Trey Lance near the sideline. That set up a field goal try, 55 yards at the buzzer. The 49ers simulated the end of the game or the end of the half, set up the field goal try of 55 yards for the rookie Jake Moody, who drilled it. The 49ers have option power at kicker, and they have option power, obviously, at quarterback, because at kicker, you've got Jake Moody and Zane Gonzalez, and we know how that's probably going to go. Zane Gonzalez, 49ers would hope they can trade him if he continues kicking well, but he booted 3 field goals today, including a 57-yarder. Jake Moody booted 3 field goals today, including that practice-winning 55-yarder. And to me, that's a theme of how the 49ers operate, because they want as many good players as possible at positions where outsiders seem to think that it's some kind of impediment to have more good players. I don't understand why, but outsiders don't talk about kicker that much because teams normally only have room for 1 kicker. But the 49ers have 2 kickers this year. They have Jake Moody, the rookie. They have Zane Gonzalez. Does that mean they're going to carry 2 on their 53-man roster? No, it doesn't. But it means they have an asset in the second kicker, which is likely Zane Gonzalez if he continues kicking well in this offseason. And when you have an asset can buy you something, right? An asset can put you into a better position to bolster your roster through a potential trade. Considering the fact they picked up Zane Gonzalez for literally nothing, at least a no-risk kind of trade with Carolina. It's only a pick swap of 7th rounders if he makes the 53-man roster. Considering that the buy price was so low, the 49ers are almost guaranteed to make a profit on this. That's pretty cool, right? Even if they have to cut Zane Gonzalez, he's been in their building. He's offered, I'm sure, some great advice to Jake Moody. And if you've spent the 3rd-round pick on a kicker and Jake Moody, you're going to want him to be surrounded by professionals. You're going to want him to soak up information in the NFL. So if Zane Gonzalez has just given Jake Moody 1 sentence of good advice and the 49ers have to cut him because there's no trade market, he'll still be worth it because the cost will be 0. The pick swap, the 7th-round pick swap with the Panthers won't happen if Zane Gonzalez doesn't make the 53-man roster. So no-lose situation there. And then I view the quarterback room as a no-lose situation as well. You give the way that you lose in the QB room is if somebody gets hurt and then you steeply drop off in level of play to the next guy. And the 49ers have seen that happen several times under Lynch and Shanahan. It most famously happened when Jimmy Garoppolo got hurt and the fall down to Nick Mullins and CJ Beathard was a precipitous one. Wasn't good for the 49ers, right? So you want to level out the potential drop off in a league where only 7 QBs finished all 17 games last year, right? You want to make sure that you're insulated against injuries in this National Football League because I think who was it that said you're only as good as your backup quarterback is? A football team is only as good as your backup QB. And the 49ers have lived by that throughout the course of their dynasty in the 80s and the 90s. And then we saw it with Alex Smith and Kaepernick in the 2010s. Yes, you would love to have one of the 3 or 4 truly elite guys in the game, but they don't grow on trees. And it's essentially impossible to trade for them at any given time. One of them, Aaron Rodgers, if you still consider him to be in that very upper tier club, one of them was traded this offseason, but you can keep on dreaming if you think the Packers would have been willing to trade him to another NFC team. They traded him to the Jets instead. So all 3 quarterbacks practice well for the 49ers, and that's what they want. I'm going to go through some of the QB stuff. I have it all written here in the notes. Again, Matt wrote the nice article, so be sure to check that out. We can talk about Javon Kinlaw, though, winning some of his one-on-ones. We can also talk about George Kittle being Talanoa Hufanga twice on one-on-ones. That was nice. The first rep and the receiver cornerback portion of those one-on-one battles was a streak pattern, a go ball from Brandon Ayuk. Brock Purdy threw it, but Brandon Ayuk ran the go ball against Ambry Thomas, and the throw drew pass interference. It looked like it was a little bit underthrown. Thomas was draped all over Brandon Ayuk, and Brandon Ayuk made the midair adjustment to draw the penalty flag. One-on-one season, though, was a lot of fun. And that's where Javon Kinlaw did his work. He was there with Javon Hargrave, who's impressed the 49ers today. We heard from Aaron Banks, 49ers left guard, about Hargrave being the real deal. Big-time free agent pickup this offseason. Banks has gotten to see Hargrave, obviously, on the practice field since he's an interior offensive lineman working against the interior defensive lineman. John Lynch spoke before practice, gave arrows up on Danny Gray and Ty Davis-Price. 49ers really happy with the offseasons that both of those players delivered. And Lynch's other update was expect the Nick Bosa contract situation to last longer. It doesn't sound like anything is imminent on that front. The 49ers confident that deadline pressure, which is, I get it, it's fluid. This is kind of a long deadline between the start of camp and the start of the season. They're confident that's going to help crystallize a deal. They're also concerned that Bosa's not in the building. And John Lynch today said he thinks you need to build up a little bit of a callus over the course of training camp before you're ready for week 1. I will say that Bosa was thrown into the fire immediately in week 1 without any preseason games and not as much practice in his rookie season. This was in 2019, and he was totally fine. From the very first snap onward in Tampa Bay, Nick Bosa was dominant. So maybe he's a special breed that doesn't need it, but I do think that the 49ers want Nick Bosa to be in the building as soon as possible, but they're just being realistic about that. Probably that they need to overcome the delta of demands, right? You have the demand from Nick Bosa's side. You have the counter demand from the 49ers side. And when the top money and defensive player history is on the line, you can imagine that might be a little contentious because the gap between Aaron Donald's money and TJ Watt's money, the top for a defensive tackle, who's an outlier for defensive tackles in Aaron Donald, and the top for an edge rusher in TJ Watt is large. But I do have to say this. Overall, 49ers quarterback success is a good thing for them. It's possible to have a practice where Brock Purdy, Trey Lance, and Sam Darnold, all 3 of your top quarterbacks, deliver well, deliver positively. You saw the sizzle reel. Obviously, Purdy made a mistake on the interception, but he also went 12 of 16 today, 75%. He also made several nice throws. And then you have the other 2. Darnold has been sharp since day 1, seemingly, not a single day under 50%. And Trey Lance, who might have just put up his best practice as a 49er. So, Let's look at I think it's good to go to questions right now. 49ers Q&A. Ready for your questions. I'm going into the comment section. I need to get a monitor for this spot in San Francisco, so I'm not like squinting down at this screen. Maybe I could zoom in a little bit. Yes, I can. That's a lot better. People want to start a GoFundMe to get Bosa out to practice. I don't think that GoFundMe is going to raise enough money, man. K-Dubzill's got 5 on it. McCurry Ball, I think, is playing well for the 49ers. He's really fast. Really, really fast. He's got speed and he's got size. I mean, Dre Greenlaw has both of those things, right? So I think the 49ers are trying to develop a bunch of mini Dre Greenlaws. Meanwhile, Jalen Graham, he's more in the Fred Warner mold. And that Fred Warner mold is an impressive one into which to develop players as well. Want me to make a public Yelp list of San Francisco restaurants? I will. I don't have one, but I can do that. And I'll be doing more shows, giving food recommendations. I'm still getting settled in. So you can see we still got to get the jerseys up on the wall. We got to get the Ethernet wired into the room. Right now we are wired, but we got to get the cable and not be just dangling in the hallway, that kind of stuff. And then at that point, I'm going to turn focus to more food in San Francisco for you. Brandon Ayuk is wide receiver 1. What are you talking about? He already is. He doesn't have to become that. Yeah, Kokari is good over in Jackson Square, Greek restaurant. Well, the current 49ers quarterback's doing it better than Jimmy Garoppolo did previous seasons. It's way too early to tell. I mean, if you want cumulative completion percentage, I can maybe give it to you. Well, Garoppolo wasn't in training camp last year. He was thrown off on the side field. Garoppolo was about 65 to 70% of his passes completed in training camp if we're just looking for an objective measure. The past 2 days, 49ers QBs have been very, very good. Again, I could put this back up on the screen. They started off not so great, 48% first 3 days of practice. It's bad. The last 2 days, 71%. So, I mean, I know completion percentage is not the end all be all, but it's what we can measure. And especially in move the ball periods, I've found that when we split the stats into those divisions, move the ball stuff is predictive of how a quarterback is going to do in actual games. Seems that Samuel Womack is all over the field this year. And he gets beat every once in a while, but it just seems that he's making plays. It seems that he noticed his number. That's all I can say for now. Again, the player evaluations are going to get more deep. I asked John Lynch today, I said, hey, it is not really time right now to be delving into individual evals. But I said, John, you are a DB. I noticed you watching DBs. You like to watch from the safety angle of practice. John Lynch is always there alone in center field, watching from the same angle or a little bit further back from which he played. So I really wanted to know what he thought about Deshaun Jameson, the undrafted rookie out of Texas, and what he thought about Jair Brown, who was championed by John Lynch himself. And Lynch said that he's been really, really happy with Deshaun Jameson, said that he showed up in a big way. So the 49ers are very complimentary of that undrafted free agent. He wears number 22. And obviously, Jair Brown is a player who they're very high on. Lynch said that he thinks he's going to really start showing up now with the pads on. You're correct. I think Drake Jackson physically is looking awesome. He's got, he's added the 15 pounds of weight or so, maybe even 20. Talked yesterday about Drake Jackson running down Elijah Mitchell. I mean, he not even running down Elijah Mitchell. He stayed with him stride for stride out of the backfield on the zone blitz beater. And when you could do that at 260 plus pounds, especially after you've added a lot of weight freshly, like you're very, very close to coming off of that lighter weight. So theoretically, you could still be getting used to some of the extra bulk and some of the extra muscle. Well, it didn't look like there was an adjustment period for Drake Jackson. I mean, he was stride for stride. He was blanketing the 49ers' fastest running back, Elijah Mitchell. So he looks really good there. He had a pressure today to start practice. The pressure to start practice forced Brock Purdy kind of hitch and then just kind of throw the ball into the ground. So that wasn't a productive play for the 49ers, and it was because of pressure from Drake Jackson against Colton McKivitz. Good stuff. And I mean, you combine the speed and you combine the extra power, and then the last question is, well, is he going to have the endurance to be Bosa's opposite side man for a full 17 game regular season plus the playoffs? And all of these tests have to be passed subsequently, right? You can't skip one, or you can't skip ahead to one. So far, I think that Drake Jackson has passed the physique test. He's generating some pressure at practice. Now he's got to carry it to games, and then he's going to have to carry it over consistently throughout a whole season. So we're still early in the process, but yes, the returns at this point for Drake Jackson are good. "15 games out of Kinlaw would be a dream for the 49ers. 15 is a long season. Longer than any of these guys played in college, right? That was one of the issues with Drake Jackson last year. The most he had ever played in one season at USC, 11 games. All of a sudden now, Drake Jackson with the 49ers, they had 20 games last year. So you can see how he can run out of steam over time. I think that in training camp, here's a good question. Was the QB play better today, or did the defense just have an off day? Maybe pad acclimatization from Michael Otis. I think that offense just acclimates in general to training camp. You see this at almost every camp. At the start, the defense is ahead of the offense because there's a lot of intricacy needed to allow the offense to deliver cohesively. So the 49ers spent a couple days building that cohesion, going through the growing pains, and now after practice 4 and 5, you see the 49ers really hitting their stride offensively. Again, first 3 days of practice, 48% 49ers quarterbacks completion rate. Last 2 days of practice, 71%. That's an impressive jump up. So I think that this has to do with the 49ers offense starting to find its stride. All three quarterbacks played well today. And it's, again, I have to address this just because it's so prevalent on social media. And if you watch this show, you are going to get the correct information. You're going to get the objective information. You're going to get the non-clickbaity stuff, clear-headed 49ers analysis that's fair to the players, fair to the coaches. And if we're going to say that, if we're going to be fair, all the quarterbacks were good today. For some reason, there is a really hostile attitude out there toward quarterbacks who people do not consider to be their favorite. So Trey Lance people, and this is not all Trey Lance people, but the ones that are vocal online, the people that really like Trey Lance, well, Brock Purdy must have had a terrible day if Trey had a good one. The people who really like Brock Purdy and are toxic about it, oh, well, Trey must have sucked today if Brock was good. Guess what? This is possible. This right here. All three quarterbacks practiced well. And that's exactly what the 49ers want. John Lynch today talked about it. He said, you are a product of your experiences. And the 49ers did not have fun with their experience in the NFC Championship game last year when all of their quarterbacks went down with injury. And Christian McCaffrey had to throw one of the ugliest passes that I've ever seen in an NFL game. Maybe the ugliest pass that I've ever seen in an NFL game. So the 49ers are scarred by that. They're doing what you should do when something like that happens. Make sure it doesn't happen again. Make sure you've got three quarterbacks at your disposal on the 53-man roster. Hell, the NFL even changed one of its rules in reaction to how much of a disaster that NFC title game was. They added the third quarterback rule, which means if you have a third quarterback on your 53-man roster, he can be an emergency QB in case the first two quarterbacks cannot return due to injury. That third quarterback can enter the game without taking up a 46-man roster spot on Sundays. It's a significant deal. It would have saved the 49ers in the NFC Championship game last season. Now it's here, and now the 49ers want to adapt to that rule, and they want to adapt to the reality of the fact that they've lost so many quarterbacks due to injury. I mean, it's an absurdly long list of like 20 names, 20 separate injuries since 2017 when Kyle Shanahan took over. So to do that, you have to have A, good quarterbacks, and B, many of them, specifically at least 3. They have 4 that they really like, but they like Darnold. They like Darnold. They like Trey Lance, and they like Brock Purdy a whole lot more, or maybe not a whole lot more, but they definitely like him more than Brandon Allen, who only had 3 throws today, not nearly as many as the other quarterbacks. So all 3 of them could be good at once. It doesn't have to be toxic like it is on the internet, where it's my guy or the highway, right? My way or the highway is not how we operate on this channel, because that's not how actual NFL people are operating. It's not how actual NFL people in the 49ers building are operating. They are thrilled when all 3 of these quarterbacks do good things. And again, we could play a sizzle reel one more time, but Trey Lance, 9 of 11. The misses were a throwaway when Kerry Hyder pressured him and a miscommunication with Jordan Mason. There were no mechanical accuracy problems for Trey Lance today, which is a huge, huge deal. Now the thing with Trey is that he's got to keep it consistent. We've seen great days from Trey before. This might have been his best because he was really on point. I mean, you saw that throw to Ray McLeod. You saw the throw to Chris Conley before he broke out of his out pattern. Trey's been a good intermediate thrower, I think, essentially for the entire time with the 49ers. I mean, intermediate throwing has been his bread and butter. Long throwing, and we've seen some bombs that he's completed. It's the short game where Trey Lance has struggled most. Today, the 49ers had a mix of short and intermediate passes for Trey Lance, and he hit all of them. But there have been practices before when he has hit some of those short throws. The question is, how quickly before he misses another one? Because that's what the 49ers are concerned about. So the key for Trey Lance moving forward is taking this performance today, which is very good, and making it consistent. And making it consistent, especially in the short game, because any football coach will tell you, if the short game is not there, nothing is. You have to have the short game on which to build the rest of your passing offense. So Trey Lance, good step in the right direction today. I think it was his best career camp practice, and I'm looking forward to seeing more from Trey Lance to see if he can perpetuate it, to see if he can show the consistency that the 49ers so badly need from him at that quarterback position. Because listen, with Trey Lance, it's more about raising the floor now than it is raising the ceiling. Because we already know that the ceiling's really high, but you're never going to be able to get to your ceiling if you don't jump off of a higher floor. You can't have this big of a gap, right? You can't have the floor, the ceiling be up here, and then the floor be way down here, and then expect to jump and touch that ceiling. You've got to keep the ceiling high and raise the floor. So you don't want to get into a position where you're lowering the ceiling, where you're essentially, neutering a quarterback's game. You don't want that. You don't want to take away from what Trey Lance can do so explosively, which is so exciting to a lot of fans. You want to make sure that he can keep that exciting ability to improvise, to run, to launch a few footballs downfield. But you don't get to all that fun stuff if you can't complete the 5-yard gimmies, the 3-yard gimmies, the bread and butter short stuff that neutralizes opposing pass rushes, keeps defense off balance. That's what Trey Lance has to do. And today, John Lynch complimented Trey for seeking out Jeff Christensen, the quarterback's coach this offseason, who's been able to work on his mechanics, turn him into a quarterback that looks a whole lot different. To Trey Lance's credit, I think that he's maintained a lot of the adjustments that he and Christensen worked on, even into live action and training camp. That was something a lot of people doubted. And we're just going to have to kick back and see how this is going to continue. Because if it continues on the trajectory that the 49ers saw today with Lance, with Sam Darnold, who was sharp again, and with Brock Purdy, and you saw the sizzle reel of Brock Purdy completing a big pass to Christian McCaffrey and a couple more successes, if it all continues along today's trajectory, Monday, July 31st, the 49ers are going to have one robust quarterback room, and that was obviously one of their focuses to address entering this offseason. Again, for those of you who just joined, Christian McCaffrey from Brock Purdy, 70 yards. 2 angles from the 49ers. This is courtesy of the 49ers, by the way. Fred Warner, cooked by Christian McCaffrey, but Fred shouldn't feel bad. Happens to a lot of linebackers. Trey Lance, back-to-back throws to the sideline. Second one, Daz Newsome, the intended target, broken up by Samuel Womack. Chris Conley, veteran wide receiver, speedy veteran wide receiver from Sam Darnold. Here's Purdy dancing away from some pressure. Good job while he was rolling left. So remember, he's got an outlet on the right, flipping his hips, firing back across the field. Sam Darnold, Deebo Samuel, Skinny Deebo, they call him. Trey Lance, handoff. Deebo Samuel. You can expect them to do both, handoff and run some pass patterns this year. There's Lance. There's Chris Conley. That was, I thought, Lance's most impressive throw. It was in the air before Conley made his break. Darnold, McLeod, who made a couple catches today. Interception here coming from Purdy. This was intended for George Kittle, but Dre Greenlaw got up to turn the ball over. And now we get to see Lance working to Tay Martin in the 2-minute drill. And the final play, this was right before that in the 2-minute drill. Look at that ball placement, right where it had to be. And the catch was made. Excellent, excellent stuff from Ray McLeod, and obviously on the throwing end from Trey Lance. It was a fun practice. It really was. It was the longest practice so far of the year. So the 49ers are really building up the endurance now. They'll start to build up a callus with the pads on. I mentioned at the top of the show, the pads were popping. Put this up here. Time for pads. There were hits. And to me, it was tough for Elijah Mitchell because he was the one that was bearing the brunt of this. Good news is that he left this practice healthy. He was fine. I know Elijah Mitchell's gotten hurt a lot, and today he was getting popped. Demetrius Flanagan-Foles got him. Dre Greenlaw got him. I mean, guys were going after Elijah, maybe even a little bit after the play, but Elijah was fine after. So it's physical out there. It really, really is. And it turned into a fight today. But they say that competitiveness, I'll tell you what, the 94 Niners fought a lot in training camp. The Ronnie Lott 49ers of the 80s fought in training camp. Sometimes you need that iron sharpens iron competitiveness at these sessions. And I think that if you want to look at this optimistically, 49ers have that. The 49ers have been talking some crap on social media between offense and defense, and now it carried over into the football field. Javon Kinlaw making waves. I think it's time for a Lombardi Will Be Right Back break because I am out of water. So why don't I put this up on the screen? Putting it in the comment section. So see you guys in just a second, and we'll keep this show rolling. All right. I promised I'd be back. I was gone, go for broke, but a great little comment up. Look at that. Why can't some 49ers fans just be glad the 49ers have three, maybe four viable quarterbacks? How's that a bad thing? Why pit them against each other? They're on the same team. Well, that's because some people would rather the 49ers not do well than be wrong. They just want to be right so bad. They'd rather be right than the 49ers do well. And a lot of people have already dug their trench and they're in that spot. They're like, this is my guy. Planted my flag here. This is my guy. We're going to fight over this. It's combative. That's the problem. It's a combative culture that we live in right now. So, but the truth of the matter is that none of those opinions matter. You know, everybody thinks that because they can tweet something or say something on YouTube that the opinion matters. It doesn't. I don't think in my opinion matters. I'm honored that everybody here is watching the show and you think that it does. But in the grand scheme of things, what I say is not going to change what the 49ers do. All I can do is analyze what they're doing, right? And that's what I do every single day. And the accurate analysis of what the 49ers are doing, because they've actually said that they're doing this and they've said it after I said it. So obviously it corroborates a lot of my theories. The accurate analysis is they're building as strong and robust of a quarterback room as possible. And no, you're right. There's nothing wrong about that. Yeah. Why don't you guys put this out there? You could broadcast this far and wide. I was the one that recommended the 49ers should draft Trey Lance. Not Justin Fields, definitely not Mac Jones, Trey Lance. I also predicted they would do that. Ended up being right. So lose me with all the, oh, he's biased against Trey Lance stuff. No, you are telling on yourself that you are biased against Brock Purdy or Sam Darnold or whoever else when you try to call the person who initially called for the 49ers to draft Trey Lance before the trade up. Mind you, I predicted that or I called for it before the trade up. You're telling on yourself when you're calling that person, the person who initially called for the drafting of Trey Lance, biased against Trey Lance. We do not live in a delusional world. You might live in a delusional world, but we don't. Leave it at that. I am following the data. And the data right now suggests, obviously, that Brock Purdy is the 49ers' preferred quarterback because he's been playing in the regular season and in the playoffs and succeeding in both environments. But it's also suggesting that Trey Lance and Sam Darnold are both getting better. And these are two former number 3 overall picks. You only get picked number 3 overall because somebody sees a whole lot of talent in you. That's a really valuable draft pick. These guys were both picked at number 3, and neither of them has so far lived up to his draft billing. One has had a longer chance than the other. Sam Darnold's been in the league a lot longer than Trey Lance. Yes, that all makes sense. But neither of them has consistently reached a ceiling that would, how do we say it? It's hard to make. I want to say that would make the amount of draft capital spent for them worth it. Well, at this point, Sam Darnold is no longer with his original team, the Jets. That's 2 teams ago. So it's not even a draft capital consideration. And for the 49ers, well, it's going to be hard to recoup that kind of value, right, from Trey Lance. I mean, you look at all the first rounders they traded. You look at the players that they could have had instead. Well, they have Trey Lance now. Deal with it. You move forward. And that's just the way it is. Now he has a chance. Trey Lance has a chance. Sam Darnold has a chance to live up to those prior expectations. And in the case of Trey Lance, to recoup some of the cost that it took for the 49ers to get him. I think the all O-line's looking good because, hey, for the quarterbacks to complete 75% of their passes, which is the case today, even a little bit more, I think, for the top 3 guys, you got to block for them. And I thought they blocked for him today. So I think the 49ers offensive line is looking fine. The team is deep again, this time at quarterback too. Well, they were deep at quarterback last year too. So don't speak too soon. Right? I mean, they really lucked out in being able to re-sign Jimmy Garoppolo at the rate that they got him for in late August. They obviously had Trey Lance, but it all would have fallen apart had Brock Purdy not been drafted in the 7th round. So the 49ers had real QB depth last year, but they ran out of QBs. This year, they're trying to take it a step further. They're trying to keep 4 really quality names in the building. Can McGlinchey potentially be no, can McKivitz potentially be an upgrade from McGlinchey? Yeah, pass protection wise, he can. Absolutely. Because Mike McGlinchey was a very average pass protector at best. So you look at that and you say, well, if McKivitz is just a little bit above average after several years of development with the 49ers, yeah, he can be better. Thoughts on the secondary? Well, I know Deshaun Jameson is impressing the 49ers with his fight. Jair Brown, they say that the learning curve he was really impressive in OTAs. Now the learning curve has caused him to not be as much in the spotlight, but John Lynch really is happy with how he's doing, and he thinks that he's going to be making some big strides with pads on. Diomedar Lenore looking as competent as ever. Ambry Thomas, well, it's been trial by fire for him. It's gotten a lot of work against Brandon Ayuk, and that generally goes in Brandon Ayuk's favor. Tashawn Gibson's a vet. Talanoa Hufanga is an all-pro. Isaiah Oliver is going to be a starting nickelback for the 49ers. Samuel Womack is showing up all over the field. It's a good secondary, I think. I just, the cornerback depth to me is the biggest question mark because Charvarius Ward has missed a little bit of team drill time with a groin injury. It doesn't seem to be severe because he's in uniform at practice. He's doing all the other stuff, but you're going to have to make sure that it doesn't fall off a cliff after the first 2 corners in Diomedar Lenore and Charvarius Ward. Samuel Womack is a big part of that. And then you need guys like Ambry Thomas to deliver if you're the 49ers. This early in camp, you definitely shouldn't have to declare anything. You let them compete. Even number 1, you don't have to declare. I mean, we know that Brock Purdy is the solid favorite. We know he's getting all the first team snaps. We know which way Kyle Shanahan is leaning, but he doesn't have to sit there and say you're going to start against Pittsburgh on September 10th because it's too early. This is what training camp is for, to see what you have as a football team. It's moldable clay and then mold it into your dream team. Jake Moody's looking really good out there. He kicked 3 field goals today, including one of 55 yards. The other guy, too, Zane Gonzalez, was 3 of 3 today, one of 57 yards. This is turning out to be a really good situation for the 49ers. Just like they have all those QBs, they have all these kickers. They have 2 of these kickers. Might be able to flip one for a profit when deadline day looms. You asked a long time ago if this channel was biased. What the hell are you talking about? Just watch and you could tell it's unbiased. We're putting out data, calling it like it is, and that's about as straight of an answer as you're ever going to get from anybody. Not even sure if that question deserves one, but whatever. All right, I'm going to end it right now because we're at 49 minutes. We'll talk to everybody soon. Take care.